Hello, my friend, and welcome to this episode of A Call to Leadership. I am Dr. Nate Salah. I am so glad you are here. If you've ever been a human being, and you have likely had negative thoughts. We call it stinking thinking. And those thoughts have tremendous dominion and influence over our perspective in life, our energy, our motivation, our discipline, the habits we form. And we have to make the conscious choice to make change in our lives, because the negative thoughts do not lead to the optimistic future that is right there in front of us. The life of abundance, the life of fulfillment, the life of completeness, the life that we so desperately desire, but yet sometimes can't turn the corner because we think it's so monumental. So many things have to change, big things. What if we just took baby steps? And what if we changed one incremental thought at a time? Well, friend, I have a wonderful guest on the program, Jason Yarusi, who is going to unpack some of his transformative experiences, massive story of impact and change that's inspiring. And we'll dig deep and we will find a shared purpose with a proven plan to help take that step out of negativity into abundance, into the optimism that you're being called to receive. Can't wait for you to listen in. This is A Call to Leadership. Jason, welcome to this program.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, man. Yeah, so interesting timing for our conversation around this idea of aiming for greatness and your journey and some of the principles that you bring to the table, because I think they're really important, especially for our listener recently. And I want to kick it off with a short story, and then I want to hear about your how you process some of this in your own walk. So I'm 52 this year. And my dad died at 62. And so in our family, heart disease is definitely a concern. And my dad didn't want to get a stent. And so he was like, I'm just going to take my chances. And sadly, he passed. Now, that was his decision. And of course, we had lots of great time together before that. However, I give you that preface to say that, I take pretty good care of myself, but it's possible that, I might die at 62. And I think about that as not as debilitating. However, from the perspective of, what if I had 10 years to live? Of course I could die as we're speaking, or any time in that time frame, or 20, 30, 40, 50, hopefully maybe years after that. I'd love to live as long as I possibly can before I make my way to heaven. And blaze, if you will. However, if it's 10, if that's my marker, that really has an impact on how I show up every day, because that finite marker for me creates this sense of, I don't want to call it urgency, but sense of presence in the moment, that these moments are a gift and I have to maximize the value of them because they're limited. And the truth is, whether or not it's 10 years or 5 years or 2 days or whatever it is, they're limited, right? We're only going to be here for so long. And so I lay that out, and it might sound kind of heavy, but I lay that out as we begin our conversation around how you also have adapted to show up with your best self, aiming for greatness. Because in this day and age, I don't know that we necessarily pay enough attention on the way that we impact the world around us and what's between our ears. The most valuable, you're a real estate guy, the most valuable real estate on the planet, right, is the real estate between our two ears.
It's really surprising the stories we tell ourselves, right? I can remember, and so I'm 46, I just turned 46, right? And I can remember being 23, right? And the difference between 23 to 46, it's happened in a split of a second. But I can remember at 23, telling myself I was too old to do certain things, right? There were certain things that I was too old to do, right? And I look back at that as that, it was just the way my mind was grasping. I was too old to potentially go after this one career. I was potentially too old to start this thing, right? And now, as you look at this, right, I that was a story I was telling myself. And now if I look back and look forward to today as 46, I think how silly that was, because today I'm thinking that I have the opportunity to do a million things still with the time I have left here. Now, like you said, I can't tell you how much time that is, right? But I can tell you that I'm going to use that time to the best of my ability. For many years, I wasted that time. I spent a lot of time just doing things thinking I had really tomorrow. And that's always that dangerous paradigm, because what that does is it constantly leads you to a place of unhappiness, because you think that you need tomorrow because for today you need to get ready for tomorrow, right? So if I, could just go and read one more book, if I can go and meet just one more person to talk to, or if I can go just learn that one more thing, you get in this cycle where you're constantly just giving yourself excuses for why you need to wait for some future time for you to start what truly is your life. Right. And that becomes scary, because what happens is tomorrow becomes a decade. It becomes 2 decades. Right. And you can think of this like, I'm sure someone's listening here who is just not truly happy with where they are in their job or their fitness. Right. You pick whichever it is. Right. But you've been telling yourself that you're going to do something at some certain point. When I have $100,000 in the bank, then I will go and start that business. Or, when I get 3 hours in a window, I'll go start working out, right? All these things that ultimately is just some way to just really push off what you could just do right now. And when you think about that, you start getting this life where you're doing things that ultimately you're not happy with, and then you're just not having happy results, right? So if you're saying, okay, I don't like my job, but I'm going to stay with my job because I have this 401k. I just got to get to the certain point. Well, every day you're just facing a life that you're not happy with. And so why go through that when you just talk about it is that our time here on earth is short. You can go through it, I'm a Christ follower. I know from your conversation you are as well, but you can think about it however you believe, how many years and hundreds of millions, billions of years you think this earth has been here. Like, even think of the last 2,000 years. Just think about now you potentially are here for 50, 75 years, 100 years. Great, as we continue to evolve here, 100 years, right? So we're barely on this earth, yet we constantly think we have so much time to just go out there and seek what we want, when in fact it's just our mind telling us of some precaution because we're worried about getting hurt. When you're born, you're worried about two things, right? Like the fear of falling down and loud noises, right? Those are two things that are ingrained with you when you're born. Yet today we have countless fears. Now, you had two when you were born, but now you have countless fears. So where did they come from, right? It came from, society, your family, your education, all these things that were ingrained to us. And it gets back to the true nature of us having to ask ourselves, what is the actual fear? Is it the actual fear of us just looking stupid, right? Potentially having someone say something bad about us, right? Actually knowing that we haven't done the work, right? What is the actual fear? Because when you can label the actual fear, you can actually treat it as what it is. It's your choice of a fear. It's not necessarily the fear, it's fear itself. Yeah. And when we can start to label these fears, right, we can start to say, okay, I'm afraid that people are going to say, I didn't make it, right? Well, in fact, then you have to ask, well, who's going to say that, right? Who are these people that are going to say that? Or are you just coming up with this in your mind? And you start to put so much bad in your body, right? That it's hard for us to get out the positive because we just keep layering and layering and layering all this negativity. And what I found in my life is that I was doing that, right? I faced a lot of loss in high school. I am just complete randomness. I went to, it wasn't like I didn't live in like a war zone. I didn't have a bunch of friends in the military. I lived in middle-class town, right? And over the course of, 13 to 17, my best friend was killed in a boating accident. My friend down the street committed suicide with a shotgun. A friend on the football team got into a car accident, being in the car with a drunk driver. And at 17, my girlfriend was killed in a car accident. Oh. And so, I went to college just like lost, like, what is going on? and just like lost. My parents, although still together today, they were facing all kinds of financial troubles, had a small business. It was just constant part of just money always being a problem. And so I went to college just like lost. And I took all that baggage with me where I left college, just really no desire. Like you just have a lot like things taken from you. You just kind of lose your path. And moved into New York City with a business finance degree. And I had no real path. And so I just started working a bunch of like odd jobs, working in bars, working in restaurants, just doing a bunch of things that you just didn't feel any fulfillment, right? I didn't feel good with what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. I didn't feel like I was progressing. And I did that for a couple of years, and I was just angry with the world, right? I was angry for, my life. I was just blaming everything, blaming society, blaming anything, blaming my upbringing, blaming my schooling. And lo and behold, one night, walking out of a bar, get on a bicycle, ride across Manhattan, and out of nowhere, I get hit by a car, thrown into the air. And next thing I know, I'm in the hospital. Get some stitches in my chin, back of my head, I get a pin in my wrist, I got a broken bone in my shoulder. And I finally got out of the hospital a day later, and all I'm thinking about is like, I need to get back to this bartender job that I don't want to be at because I need to make money for rent. And I made this agreement with myself in a moment that I was like, okay, listen, that is the craziest conversation that you're ever going to have with yourself, because all you do is hate where you are. And now you're just trying to get back to where you don't want to be after getting hit by a car. And so I made this moment of discovery where I said, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need to do something different. And lo and behold, I just started to make small changes. Don't stay out late. Don't drink at night. Get up and start working out. Like start reading books. Like start taking something in. And it wasn't like this rapid transformation, but just a changing of that just started to take all the negative inputs that I had been forcing down my throat and started to create better and better and better thoughts and ideas. And things changed, right? I went from, working behind the bar to owning a bar and restaurant. I opened and sold a brewery in New York City, started to, I went out and transformed my family's construction business that was really faltering for a lot of times before moving into real estate. And, we started working in single family residential before moving in commercial, buying apartment buildings. And lo and behold, over the course of the last 8-9 years, we've brought about 300 million of real estate, across 7 states. And so it was a lot of small changes that over time just catapulted into really big changes.
Yeah, man. Wow. What a journey of resilience, of preparation, and not taking those challenges and living in defeat. And I love the approach to the small changes. We don't have to make these monumental moves when we're simply trying to survive, right? Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's mental, sometimes it's physical, financial, spiritual, right? Sometimes we're just trying to take a breath for the day because life and life circumstances have just hit you like a freight train. And it's okay, like just to stop in that moment, because I just, rewinding to the moments when you face those kind of challenges, it's okay to say, you know what, this is hard. It's okay to say this stinks. Like, this is not my ideal experience. However, you, like someone listening like myself, you face massive trials. And the way it's hard in the moment, but the way I like to envision those trials is a strengthening. It's a strengthening of the struggle muscles. And it's you talked about, being a believer. I don't know if I love this verse or if I hate this verse in the Bible, but and maybe some days I love it, maybe some days I hate it. It's in the book of James, and here's what he says. He talks about when you're basically facing trials, and so James says, "Consider it pure joy when you face all kinds of trials or adversity or challenges." Now, who would put the words joy, not only joy, but pure, brother, pure joy? Like, who can do that? It's like, oh my goodness. And there's, I believe that that was very intentional. of James to use the language. Of course, different translations have different language. To use the language, pure joy, when you're facing those trials. And of course, he explains why. He talks about the building of your character through that experience. And I believe that's truly where character is built. I believe that strong character, and I believe that God cares deeply about our circumstances, and it will take us through our circumstances to build us into the character of Christ. I believe that. But in the moment, it doesn't feel good.
No.
Right? It doesn't feel good. However, holding on to that and identifying, okay, hey, what are these small steps in my life that need to be taken through the trial, through the challenge? For those of us who exercise, I know you get the idea of, look, man, you got to get to where almost to muscle failure. If you want to truly build it, you got to get to the. I was working out yesterday, and I'm going through this program, and I was doing bench, and it's 2 to 5 reps. You got to put a lot of weight on. So at first I had enough weight on it to where I got up to 6 reps. So I was like, okay, well, I got to put another 10 pounds on each side. And 10 pounds on each side it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's like, oh, that third rep, that was hard. It was hard. And like, okay, there you go. Now you're actually strengthening your muscles. Because when it's too easy, don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for easy, right? There's a time and a place for the beach and the relaxation, the recharging. That's just not when we're getting stronger. And I love how you frame your life experience around this, these experiences that you're facing that have led you to where you are today. Someone listening is like, okay, all right, I get that. I'm in a crisis right now. I need some steps. Jason, help me understand with some of these steps that you're talking about that have led you out of the challenges and the trials into the light and into accomplishment.
So there's crisis in many forms of our life, right? We constantly will face a crisis but I like to think of it in a couple ways, right? And there's the crisis of, it's a 5-second crisis or it's a 5-year crisis. And the 5-year crisis is something that I'm going to absolutely remember. It could be monumental in just the effect and the change in my life, right? And so, okay, we really need to focus, right? But then there's the 5-second crisis where it's something that happens in our day and we just have to get it done. And what happens so many times in life is that we treat both the same. And we're constantly it's like if you're in a car and car goes up to 8,000 RPMs, we're always at RPM 8,000 through the whole day because everything's like your whole day is like that because everything is hitting you and it's all urgency, it's all crisis, right? Because you're treating it all as crisis. But when you can break this down, you say, okay, part of me growing is that I'm going to have to face these incremental challenges that are going to come up through my day, through my week, right? There is no, we always want easy, but there is no easy in life. Life has its challenges, but our ability to grow through a challenge is what makes us and what brings us out the other side. And hard is not the same for two people, right? Right. And so if I was to go out there and run a mile, that might be really hard for someone, but then someone else, it might be really easy for, right? Because they have their own level of hard. So we have to look at the challenges we're facing today. The best way to go and deal with what we say is crisis is that we have to break down what we're actually dealing with. Because right now we might say, I'm sick. I'm in a fight with my wife. I'm about to get fired at my job. At some part, my car needs a new tire, right? And so now at this part, we're in crisis. But in fact, that makes it so much more involved and hard to deal with because we haven't gone and completely become secular with each of the challenges. Okay, I need a new tire. Do I have the money to pay for it? No. Okay, what else can I sell or can I go do or can I borrow money, right? I'm going to fight with my wife. Okay, let's break this down. Why did that fight come up? Well, it's a fight over money. Well, why did it come over a fight over money? Because, I had $400 and I wouldn't spend it on a TV when in fact I could add that money for a tire, right? So, okay, we break that down. Okay, so how can we go back and have that conversation, right? So when you put these each onto paper and each into their own place, you can start to deal with each thing that's in front of you in a way that you can come up with an action. Because usually we just put out there into the universe the verbiage of what's happening, right? I'm in a crisis. But the whole part is that you have to have the cause and act, right? Okay. If the cause is this, well, what's the action to that, right? You are a problem solver in your own life. But many times we're just a problem giver, right? I come in and I see many people in front of me that just give me problems. Well, okay, well, that's fine. Like I love, I have great teams, I have a number of businesses. And for the people to come in there, at first, it's, I have this problem. And the goal is to go out there and allow them to really use their mind to come up with a solution. Because the best is they bring me a solution. Even if it's wrong, they've at least thought through the process and I can now help craft a solution. But if they're just giving me a problem, well, it's like me, going and just constantly giving them food, right? They're not going to learn how to find the food or grow the food or make the food, right? Because they're constantly just seeking the answer. And in our life, we have to become problem solvers in our own life. And for us to do that, we have to dissect each thing that's in front of us and just do it one at a time. You can't solve all the problems at once, right? If you're about to lose your job, you're going to fight with your wife, you're out of shape and your car just broke down. You can't deal with all of them at the same time. So let's take that off the plate. What's the most urgent thing that needs to be happening? Well, I'm on the side of the road right now and with a flat tire. Okay, that's the problem I need to solve. The rest of it can come after. But if I just face it all at RPM 8,000, well, my life continues to be out of control.
And overwhelmed.
And I faced that for so many years. I was constantly out of control until I took back control. Because now the next piece of your problem is to say, okay, what can I control? And what can't I control? And if you can't control them, okay, well, let's change our mindset on those problems, right? Let's change our mindset. But for the ones I can control, let's put them in order of progress of what needs to be tackled right now, what can wait, and then start working one down after the other. And you will get calm in your mind because now you've set an action plan to go out there and just create change in what's happening.
Man, just nuggets right there, brother. Just nuggets. The thought that's coming to my mind as you're sharing this is that, one, expect the unexpected. I think part of the challenge we face in that whole expression, because most of us have had a fight with our spouse, we've had money problems, we've had a flat tire, we've had perhaps some employment problems, whether we were an employer or an employee, right? I mean, all these problems are very common to all of us. And the way I tend to frame all this is, what was I expecting? And when we met on the call, you asked me how I was. I said, well, I'm here, I'm alive, right? I don't mean that like oh, I'm here. I'm like, hey, that's an exciting thing, because that means my work's not finished yet, and everything for the day, no matter what happens, I'm still here, I'm still alive. It's a pretty good thing, right? So that's like, start with the baseline of, I've got a flat tire, but guess what? I'm still alive. So that means that this one challenge I'm facing, I'm not out of the game. I'm still in the game. There's a way to work through this. Plus, if you had your day that you could see it in like a transcript or a movie before you had your day, right? And you saw, oh wow, at this part of the day I got a flat tire. At this part of the day my employer was threatening to fire me. At this part of the day my spouse and I got into an argument, et cetera, right? And you knew that was coming. You may have a different perspective. You might still say, oh, well, that's, these are challenges I have to face, but it's happening. In other words, if you get to replay your day, if you get to relive your day, like the whole Groundhog Day back thing with Bill Murray, like if you got to do that, the sting would, I think, in some ways dissipate, because like, okay, well, I expected that to happen. Now I'm going to deal with it. Maybe I'll deal with it a different way because I've already lived it once, right? I can suit up and say, okay, well, I got the flat tire, but my day ended up okay because I got to hug my spouse and I got to see my kid and I'm still here. And I guess the point I'm making is, one, there's a point as we're looking through the looking glass of our life and our day, one, to live in gratitude. Live in gratitude that I can solve this problem. And perhaps some things I can't. Like you said, I love the perspective of, there's some things that are in my control. There's some things that are out of my control. And whatever's in my control, I'm going to be diligent. I'm going to be resourceful. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to knock stuff out. Whatever's out of my control, there's nothing that I can do except for do the best I can with what I have. And you know what that does? And I know this does it for you. Take some of the pressure off. Because we think we need to be able to solve every problem, be in control of everything. And again, just the way you worded it, even with your team, whether they be your business team, whether they be your family team, your community team, or whoever you're leading, it's not our responsibility to solve every problem. In fact, I always say I don't want people around me who I have to solve the problems for everyone. I want people who solve problems that I didn't know I had. That's who I want around me. That's your A player. That's your game changer. And so when we delegate, we encourage and we step back and say, I trust you. I trust you that you can help solve this problem. And maybe it's not the first shot out. Maybe they're working on a new project and you've done it well every single time. My son and I were spackling a wall yesterday. My wife said, hey, you need to show him how to do that. I said, yeah, I'm showing him, but I'm showing him by him doing it. He's going to have, and spackling's not easy. If you've ever spackled, you know this, right? It's an art. And it takes patience. It takes discipline. And he's not going to get it right away. That's okay. We're gonna be in the trenches together. Eventually he'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I love that. It's so easy for us to just look at the things in our day and just really react so quickly. And, one of the best things you can do is just, if something comes across your plate and it's not ideal, it's that moment of pause, right? That 5 seconds that you can just take to just let it sink in. And that usually cures almost 95% of your reactions, because, it's like you get, you get anything, you get a splinter, right? And you treat everything like a splinter, like your leg just got chopped off, right? Where in fact, like, it's just a splinter, just take the splinter out, right? But then we go off and we just get so angry, we get so upset, we get so overall. And then what happens? Well, you make a bad reaction and it typically creates this whole circumstance that follows, that now you have to go and fix later. You now have to go bring back into control. And so, not to say don't get excited and good or bad, but the more that you can control the alleyway you're in, right, the lane you're on, in terms of just ups and downs, the easier it is for you to go through life, right? Like, your thing you were saying earlier about, just what we can and can't control. Like, the easiest thing to point out there is like the weather, right? How many of you just, oh, it's going to rain tomorrow, and all of a sudden, like, you're like, oh, like, oh, it's going to be 25 degrees out. You're like, oh. And it's this whole thing that's like, it's going to happen one way or the other. Like, but it really opens up a way that you can just take it back. Like, I probably, maybe about 10 years ago, I just stopped looking at the weather. I found out, like, I was living in New Jersey then, now I live in Tennessee, and like more milder here and whatever, but best thing I ever did. Like, if something catastrophic is going to come up, I'm going to get the alert, right? If there's a tornado warning here, I'm going to get alert. Like, randomly snows here, barely ever. Well, my kids are out of school, I get the alert, right? I find out it's going to snow, like, but me, like, tracking the weather every day, like 90% of the time the weather changes and it's not ideally how it says. But I've now, like, made up my mind. And many times, like, we set the expectation of what the outcome is going to come, and we set our mind on that, right? So if I do this thing, right, if I go out there and try anything, the result is going to be some cataclysmic event that's going to ruin my life, right? And so we've already made up our mind on the decision of how things are going to go. When in fact, if we can just go and just look at everything for what it is, like, I could take this action, and this action can spawn creativity, could spawn just something. I'm going to learn something, right? Well, your mind opens up to a million new things, and you start to look at yourself as the possibility for outcome instead of just the inability for escape, right? And you do this in your life enough that you just start to just make these little changes, just take these little steps. You find that you start to break free. And like you said earlier, like, it's not the big things, it's the small things. Like, big leaps are hard to do. Like, that's why, 92% of New Year's resolutions fail. Well, let's ask the question, well, why? So, you haven't worked out in a year and now you're going to lose 50 pounds in a month. And you're like, okay, I'm on it, right? First day you work out 3 hours. The next day you're so sore you can't work out for a week. The next day after that you go, a week you try to go work out again. You're like, oh, you get busy, right? Or you're tired, it goes flat, right? Well, and then you just give up. It's because you tried to make this whole thing instead of just saying, okay, you know what? 4 times a week I'm going to go to the gym for 15 minutes. Like, okay, doesn't sound like a lot, but what if you just do that? And then the next week you do that, and the next week you do that, and the next week you do that. What do you think starts happening in your life, right? Like, 1, you start to create discipline. That's fantastic. 2, you start to create change because now you've told yourself you're going to do something and you do it. That's the most important thing in anything in our life, is that we commit to something and then we actually do it. We've gotten ourselves off the hook all the time that we say things today that we should do something, but we say we should and then we don't do it. Right. And then our mind gets in this layer of that we actually give ourselves permission to just ultimately put off everything we want to do because tomorrow's okay. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow will make a difference. And you do that enough and your life goes by.
Yeah, and eventually tomorrow doesn't come. Right. Eventually, for every person on this planet, tomorrow doesn't come at some point. Am I right? Right? That's a guarantee, unless Jesus comes back sooner. Right? It's a guarantee that everyone is having their last day. Someone is having their last day right now. And it's interesting you bring that up because as you're talking about it, I was thinking about this whole 10-year thing, right? So look at this 10-year thing. I don't look at it like, oh my goodness, it's 10 years. I look at it day by day. So when I got up this morning and I got ready to leave the house, okay, Nate, don't forget, this could be your last 10 years, which means this day is just that important. This day, you will never get this day back. So how can you live fully? They say, I love the brave part, right? All men die, right? If you ever live kind of thing. How can you live so fully that it adds to that 10-year march, if you will, in such a way that you look back at this day and say, I lived fully that day. And I know if I'm living fully, I'm probably not going to sweat the small stuff. And granted, there are big things in life, but the majority of them are, in fact, small things, right? The car didn't start, or the umbrella didn't open, and I got rained on, or whatever it is. And it reframes in the small things. It reframes the entire trajectory of the day, just day by day. And my day, for example, today, I came into the office. Things weren't working. We have a computer didn't turn on right and things like that. I'm like, okay, all right. That's, maybe somebody would get flustered. And I just told the team, hey, you know what? You got one monitor instead of two today. All right. Guess what? You still got a monitor. And so let's work with that. And by the way, your energy is contagious, right, Jason? Our energy is contagious, especially as a leader. I'm talking to the leader here. Whether our energy is negative, whether it's positive, whether it's engaging and motivating, whether I look at it like this. You either have energy of mastery or misery. And that is a choice. We choose. There's a lot of things you can't choose in life. If you've listened to the program, I've said this before, right? One thing you can, it's your attitude, right? I can choose my attitude in the moment, which then sets a model for those around me. And let me tell you, friends, our kids, I only have one and 17, and they watch, they listen, they learn. And that meter, that tone, that intonation, that how do you react when you face a moment? That's the model we set. So it's up to us, as you had said before you even started, to be self-aware. Like so much of our showing up is starting with self-awareness, awareness of, okay, what's my vibe? What's my energy? And sometimes I think test runs. Like these are very, sometimes it's a small test run. I had something fall on my foot yesterday and I was limping around the house. I'm like, I still got my toe. All right. And if I didn't, okay, I still got my foot, right? Oh, and if I didn't, right, just go down the list. I still can see. Like this is going back to the playbook of no matter what happens, the gratitude. In fact, even Scripture says, be thankful in all things. No, not for all things. So some things are pretty rough, right? But that's not what Paul was saying. In all things. In other words, in all things, walk in gratitude, because I think that is so much of the great elixir and really what takes that misery and turns it into mastery.
You talk about grace, and I think for gratitude, we miss just actually getting back to that each day. It's a hard thing, especially if you're feeling in a dark spot, you're feeling like we forget to be grateful for the small things we have, right? And because in front of us is usually, whether it be social media or just our circle, right? There's people who are fairly potentially doing better than us, or have more to us, or seemingly, have something that looks more grandeur than we do, right? But if you just put us compared to the majority of the world, we're in a fantastic place in all parts, right? Just education, health, financial ability, right? Anything, right? But we forget to be grateful for that, because ultimately we've set in our part, what the standard should be. When in fact, that's a standard that we've put in our mind or we've heard from somebody else. But the only way to really get back to this true nature of what is possible is just reframing your expectations and then honestly making sure your principles align. If you were to say to somebody else that potentially knows you or just like someone who's watching you for a day, 2 days, or a week, what would they say your principles are, right? Is this a man of his word? Is a man who desires, to go seek progress, right? Is this a man who opened doors for other people? Is this a person who basically says we're going to do and then follows up and does it? Or is this a person who really doesn't take advantage of the moment? Is this a negative person? Is this a person who is greedy, is always trying to get over on others? Like, what is it? Because if our standard and our expectations are one thing, but our principles say another thing, right? And you can do this, right? You want to just make this real. Okay, have an out-of-body experience, right? Sit here right now, and in the next hour, as you're acting, imagine yourself watching yourself, right? Just doing it. What would that person say about you? What would the you outside of you say about yourself? Would it say that you're doing the actions and the steps of the person who wants to have the success in life that you're saying you want to? Or is it going to say, oh, well, you know what? I know you say you want that, but you're actually not doing anything. You're not doing any of the steps. You're not going after any of the goals. You're not going after and taking the action. You're not going out there and doing the work. You're not going to prepare yourself. You're not going to make yourself better in any way. And if that's the truth, then we have to reframe our expectations. Okay, then if you're not going to act accordingly, then you can't be surprised if you're not getting the results. But if you want to get the results, then we have to start making small changes. They say 1% improvement a day is not a lot, but if you compound that over a year, 1% improvement over the course of a year is 3,800% of it, which is huge.
Yeah. And it changes everything. It changes everything over time. It changes you. And that's the thing about the incremental change and moving, starting with discipline. Well, actually starting with motivation, really getting motivated, and then turning that into discipline. And eventually that turns into habits, right? And we have new habits formed through that. And the change in us, what is our change? Our change is really aiming for greatness. What does greatness look like? Greatness looks like the ability to be whole, to be complete, to be mature in our journey as leaders, as servant leaders, if you will. And that's really the aiming. And so how do we do that? We do that through repetition, through practice, through the little things, day by day by day, and we walk and see that change. And sometimes, and it's different for each of us. I love the way to analyze that, to the out of body experience, to take some inventory of how we perceive ourselves, because again, that's back to self-awareness, and it's not designed for self-condemnation. It's self-evaluation. And self-evaluation is essential for getting feedback, get feedback from others too. Especially if you're married, and so a lot of us, there's no better honest person in a lot of ways than your spouse, right? Your friends, your coworkers, everybody might think you're the best thing since sliced bread, but your spouse gets a hold of you like, well, I know you, I know you. And so solicit honest feedback to say, hey, you know what? There's areas I want to grow in. I want to be the best version of myself I can be for you, for our family, for our community, for myself, for life. And I want to give you permission. I want to give you permission to share with me how you see me and how you would love to see me. It's a good place if you can be there.
It's truly not, the goal is not to go and beat yourself down for where you are. The goal is to set a starting line, because you have to know exactly where you are right now, because that's where the plan starts, right? The plan can start on the person that you want to be, a year from now, 5 years from now, or a month from now, right? The person has to start with where you are right now. So to be self-aware of how you're showing up, you could truly own it. You can say, okay, I am not that person right now. I am showing up, negative. I am showing up, pessimistic. I'm showing up doubtful. I'm showing up in these ways. And so the person I want to be shows up in these different ways. This person is energetic, right? Creative, thought-provoking, affirmative. Okay, so what is my starting line is right now? Like, what is this step to get from A to B? And then you can start putting in the work to start building yourself into the person you truly deserve to be. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, for example, let's talk about road rage. So there's a there's a soft spot in so many people's hearts when it comes to if they've gotten cut off, or if somebody sped by them, or they were called the proverbial number one for whatever reason on the road or highway. And I've learned over time to gamify it in a way, if you will, and say, they may be having a bad day, or they might be somebody just speeds by. Maybe they've got they had something, and they really got to get to the bathroom. I don't know anyone. Now, of course, it could be none of that. What I'm doing is I'm changing the narrative. The narrative that I tell myself that causes me angst, causes me anxiety, causes me to be. I used to be very cynical, and I'm still working on that. Still work in progress. I used to have such great cynicism. I'm like, Nate, you got to change that. You got to, walk in less cynicism and more in, the instead of the cynic, walk in the person who's affirming instead of cynical. And that's not something that happens overnight, right, Jason? It happens step by step, day by day, moment by moment. Sometimes you take 2 steps forward, sometimes you take 1 step back, but you keep moving forward in how you show up. And for me, now I still, there's still some of that, and it's just more of like tongue in cheek and jokes. However, now I've changed. I've learned to be more affirming, less about, oh yeah, you should have known better, right? And say, well, I get it. That situation didn't go the way you expected. Let's talk about how the next time it happens. Maybe there's a way we can mitigate that, right? It's a much different conversation, and it's a much different posture as a human being.
It's so much easier when you don't take everything to max, right? It's so much easier when we don't just go over the edge at every little point. Like the road rage is a really funny thing, because like they could be rushing to the hospital, right? Something like there is 100 different things that could have happened in that moment that are outside your control, and it happens, right? It happens. I've cut people off by accident before too, right? Like I'm not perfect either, and I get to the point that when we take that out and we just get back to reality and just get back to say, okay, what can I control and what can't I control? And
it's a point of maturity too, I think. It's a point of maturity when you can, let's just use that road rage. Somebody gets in front of you, and maybe they're angry because you maybe have cut them off. Like, you're having a bad day, and maybe I contributed to that. And, you walk in a little bit of humility. That doesn't mean that you're a pushover, means people could walk all over you. I think that's the other thing, is that we're back to the fear as we started this conversation. If you're secure, if I'm secure in myself, what do I have to be afraid of? You know what? It's possible. It's possible I did something. Let me just do some self-analysis. And if I didn't, and you think I did, it's still okay. I'm secure enough in myself too. I'm not worried that you've offended me. I'm okay. It's okay. It's okay to be okay, no matter who says what to you, right? Because when I was young, Jason, I let people push my buttons. I was a hothead. I ran at that 8,000 RPMs, not only in my car, but in my life. When I was a teenager, I was always getting in fights in high school. And the guys, they knew how to press my button, especially like guys on the sports teams we played on. And I'm like, you know what? As soon as we get out of this class, we're going to the hallway and we're going to fight. And at some point, a light bulb went off. It's like, Nate, they're just controlling your behavior. They're having fun watching you like a puppet. And I made a decision. Stop letting all of your circumstances and challenges control your mood. Start to be secure in yourself, and have the I love the way you put it. Just take time. That 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half a day or a whole day. Sometimes it's a whole day. If you ever have an email that you got and you're like, oh, I'm going to respond and I'm going to let them have it.
Yep. I'm going to get them.
But yeah, I'm going to get them back.
Yep.
And then the next day you're like, boy, if I probably would have answered that a little differently had I had been in a different frame of mind. And that's what we're talking about. Give yourself the permission to just slow it down a bit.
Most important thing you said there was, I made a decision.
Mm.
And that's usually what we forget we have within our power, because all of us have the decision to be able to go and choose to act in a different way. And if we can get out of the way of just feeling like we're compelled or controlled or all those parts, we can get back to it. Right now, I can decide to just not do that.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
It is that simple. And there's so much more. You've got a whole system program. We'll make sure we'll put it into our show notes. There's so much. There's so much. We're just like scratching the surface on your how you help people.
That's in great.
Space. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, but however, before we wrap up on this part, we'll probably love to have you back actually, and maybe we'll keep rapping about your program. I every so often I have the opportunity to ask a question at the end of the show, and it's about the journey we're talking about, this journey of life, and eventually you'll be at the end of it, like myself, at we call it the Great Summit, right? The be able to see all the people who you were able to interact with and bless through your life experiences and through your wisdom and what you've learned. There's one thing that you would like others to have said about Jason at the end of this Great Summit journey, what would it be?
Easiest, most thing to come to heart is that Jason was always willing to give a helping hand.
Well, my friend, you are on your way. Thank you for being here, Jason.
Thank you for having me.